And there's a lot of nervous energy around doing something like this, saying no to customers who want to pay you in a time like this seems counterintuitive. Boom, we're live. I was just going to try and funnel some of Mr. Rogan's success there. See if we can get those numbers up.
You never know. We might
at the beginning.
Yeah, we might get a deal with Spotify or something off the back.
Yeah, let's see if Spotify come knocking on the behind the screens door. So, been looking a lot at positioning. I think imagine that during this crisis and probably in the unfortunate ensuing financial downturn, which is almost certainly, is either happened or happening or in the process of happening. I think that every company somewhat goes back to basics and looks at their positioning, about their core customers, their core offering, because you have to have something very solid and really something very simple and tangible when you're selling in a sort of downturn market. Like that's what we've seen before. And I think that's kind of the conventional wisdom. So we've been exploring this, and that's why we think it might be an interesting topic for today, to talk about how niche should you go with your customers, with your product line, with your positioning, versus trying to be a broad church where anyone who could possibly be interested may be interested. And that sounds very loaded, that the kind of the niche targeted way is the better way. I think it probably is, but you can actually get pretty far with a broad church. I think, as we've demonstrated in our current customer base, we have thousands and thousands of companies, over 9,000 of them, in a whole range of different spaces, and they're all getting value from the product because the product can be used in such a different way. Really, it's about powering screens, and it's up to you what you want to put on them. So in that respect, the screen can deliver almost anything. But I think ultimately the broad church probably doesn't get you all the way. It depends on the level of where you want to go. And that you do, if you're all honest with yourselves, if you are sort of serving a huge number of different customer types, there's probably really one or two standouts in there, which are the absolute key customers, the ones that always keep coming back, the ones that are more loyal, the ones that upgrade, the ones that give you more of the feedback, the ones that for whatever reason it might be, that you just can connect with better. And there comes a time, and that's a tricky thing to also think about, when it's time to go after that more specific one. Once you've learned enough about it and realize that is your product market fit, then to sort of start to strip away from the outskirts, learn what to say no to, and then go for that a bit more. And that's kind of where we've got to now. So we don't have an answer for it because we're still figuring it out. And there's a lot of nervous energy around doing something like this, saying no to customers who want to pay you in a time like this seems counterintuitive. What say you, David?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of, especially when you start, you don't really know. And so you're kind of flinging everything at the wall and hoping that something sticks. And then, and it is, when you were talking there, I was reminded of our agency days and that kind of whole tendency to, sometimes the clients that you took on were genuinely a mistake. They would end up costing you money. Mm-hmm. And after a while, you could predict who they were going to be before they started. But if you were a bit desperate, if you're like, we're having a month this month, you'd kind of take on these projects that you kind of said, we're not going to do those projects anymore. We're going to go and do these projects. And it's a really hard thing because, especially in the consultancy way, because, you only have, a handful of clients every month. So if you start turning work away, you're like literally got people sat there that you're paying for. And that. But in our world, a SaaS world, it's tempting to kind of not worry so much about that. But nevertheless, you do in terms of you are spread, you've got a limited amount of resources. So in terms of product, who are you serving? You could, because you could serve everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, if you went out and interviewed, 100 of our customers, you would get 100 different use cases, and 100 different feature requests and things like that. So you can't do everything for everyone. But similarly, in your marketing, the content that you're creating, especially as we move upstream and we're doing more account-based marketing, where you're specifically identifying the customers, your ideal customer persona, your ideal customer profile. Sorry. Then it becomes, you do have to pin your flag to a mast and say, it's this that we're going for. Because there are only so many hours in the day. There's only so many dollars in the bank that you've got to go after these people. And actually, if you become very, very good at one thing, then, that's probably better than being kind of good at loads of things. And that's the same in our personal lives as well. What's it, that thing that they say, to become proficient in something, you need to do it for, was it 1,000 hours? I can't remember what the
10,000 hours allegedly.
10,000 hours, yeah. I think it's a similar kind of thing. I mean, if you want to become good at running, you have to do lots of running. If you want to become good at painting, you have to kind of, it doesn't, for most of us, it doesn't just happen overnight. It's something that you have to make a commitment to and focus on. And I think, it's kind of part of growing up as a company, even though, as you say, it is counterintuitive, and the kind of slightly paranoid commercial kind of thing that I've always had is that, like, well, you don't turn away money, you don't turn away opportunity. But actually although it is counterintuitive, ultimately, you can, it's much better to dominate a kind of vertical market than kind of not really dominate anything and just kind of hope that you can share the crumbs with other people that are doing the same thing.
Isn't it interesting that almost no one in our industry, the digital signage industry, is specific to one market? Like, even the largest players, they very much, you go on their site, they'll give you 5 different use cases, from banking to retail to quick serve restaurants, to advertising.
Yeah.
And almost all of them do that.
Yeah.
Including us.
And it's so weird, because I was having a conversation last night with a distributor, and sorry, that's my wife in the background.
Yeah. So on the podcast, no one would know. I was going to say hello, Jane, but I thought, oh no, they can't see. Oh, they can.
So distributor, and I was talking about budgets and the types of budgets for the types of different use cases. I said, is there a difference? And he said, basically, retail, hospitality and quick serve restaurants have the biggest budgets, and internal comms kind of not really big budgets at all. And I was like, okay, but we're kind of that's kind of interesting to us, because we have all those customers, but we're sort of saying, actually, we think the future for ScreenCloud is much more in the internal comms market. But it's just, I think it's one of those. And then I was thinking about it, and I was reflecting on it. I was thinking, well, actually, it's a different kind of conversation.
Is that a case of someone being a bit guilty of looking backwards to see forwards?
Yeah, and also most of the stuff that they do is selling hardware. And if you imagine that if you're internal comms, they've probably got, in many cases,
want to sell huge amounts. I mean, it's not your flagship store. It doesn't need to look integrated into the wall. It could just be a regular screen TV.
And even if that is the case, actually, you kind of think, well, okay, well, if all the other digital signage companies want to go after those guys, great. If everyone's a bit too scared and finds it a bit too complicated to go after internal comms, then there's an opportunity. I mean, I'm not saying that is the case, because obviously lots of people are looking to serve that market as well. But in some ways, it's almost, you could argue it 2 ways. You could either say, are we cutting off, our arm here? Because we've got these customers, they love what we're doing, and we're kind of, by saying, actually, we don't really necessarily think that's our future. Or are you saying, well, actually, there's a big opportunity here, because there's almost an underserved market, and actually the change there and the needs there are much more profound. and probably it's much more underserved. So actually, there's an opportunity there. So yeah, it's a kind of it's an interesting kind of conversation, I suppose, that we're having.
And a devil's advocate on this would be, or do you maintain serving those different markets, but you just sort of prioritize one part more? But I mean, that's probably a worst of both worlds, right? Where you don't say no, but you sort of let things come along. But the problem is, it's like, that's kind of a sort of backdoor lazy way of doing it, isn't it? Because once a customer's paying you, like, a customer doesn't ever fit themselves into a category of, oh, I'm probably just a bit of a niche category to them. Like, the category you're in is the category that's all you care about, right?
Yeah.
So, if you are a gym chain and you're working with a company which predominantly serves, I don't know, like, let's say internal comms, then the features that would matter to you as a gym chain are unlikely to get sort of developed with as much, or developed at all, or even developed with as much kind of investment as one which was, I'm all about solving this problem.
Yeah.
Which is, and then ultimately that, as you as a customer, you probably would get a bit frustrated, I would have thought. But then if there is an argument, like, technology now, if you look at what our platform, like, if you position our platform as it currently stands and say, this is just for an internal comms team, like, anyone from another industry could come along and go, well, no, it's not actually. Like, the features you already have, what you already have, because it's an open, wide platform that really you can do. It doesn't tell you what to put on the screen. It enables you to put whatever you want up on that screen. Like, it genuinely is pretty fluid. I mean, you don't necessarily tell, a technology framework, like, what apps should be built on top of it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you think of React as a framework. React doesn't sort of naturally go, oh, but we much prefer to be on social networking apps rather than e-commerce. It's like, it doesn't care.
Yeah.
It gives you what you need to then you go and do what you need to do. And I suppose that's another interesting way of thinking about it. Like, at what point are you enabling it? If you're enabling it properly, you could be enabling it for everyone.
Well, yeah,
everyone.
You could cut it another way and say, some company might come along and say, we are an internal comms company. We're experts on all things internal comms, which is from internal marketing, internal email, intranet, blah, 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 and digital signage, right? And we're going,
they literally are ones that do that.
Yeah. And then they might be going, well, maybe we should just focus on email, or maybe we should just focus on digital, so it's almost like we're saying, well, actually we're a niche bit, we're a specialist bit of that, but digital signage cuts across more than just internal comms. So you could cut it another way and say, actually, digital signage in itself is kind of specific enough. But I guess the other thing for us, though, is that we've long felt that the concept of digital signage is people's perception of digital signage is not aligned with where we think ScreenCloud is going. So people, traditionally they think of it as digital signage. Again, like talking to the distributor last night, in his mind, digital signage is predominantly about screens. I mean, so I said, like, of the money that you're kind of putting through each year, how much of that is software? And it was tiny. It was like 1%. So in his head,
really low.
Yeah. So in his head, when someone says digital signage, he probably doesn't immediately think of software and quick serve restaurants versus internal comp. He's thinking about screens and mounts and installation and cabling and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it's and this is one of the things that we're trying to do internally now at the moment, is just like really revisit what our narrative is. And just because digital signage has been expressed in a certain way, that doesn't necessarily, we don't. That's really
fascinating, isn't it? But like, if let's say that you were going to start a taxi business 15 years ago, your CapEx would be in hiring drivers and buying vehicles.
Yeah. And probably having an office, a taxi rank and all that kind of stuff.
So like, and you, but you know, if anyone said to you, oh no, it's like, how much are you actually investing in the communication system between the drivers? They'd be like, oh, like, you know, I just get the radio thing that everyone has, and we use the, you know, remember the radio, like in the taxi? I mean, it's been a while, but like the mini cab, yeah. Number four, are you available for Clapham? Like, like, do you remember that? Like, that
Wow,
was,
how did that work? How is that
it was
even?
like the police, like who's available, who's close. Yeah. I'm just dropping off in Balham. I'll be there in 10.
Yeah.
And then you have to phone the office and say, the car, where is it? Like, they're like, it's on its way. I have no idea. It's on its way.
Yeah, you could phone the taxi rank and they'd put you on hold, and then they'd pick up another call. And just spoke to him.
Like, where are you? I'm stuck
Heavy
in traffic.
traffic.
Tell them I'm on my way. Like, I mean, that was 10 years ago, right? But that was what a taxi business was, you know, and some were slightly better at it than others in terms of organization. But the capex for that business would have been utterly different to where a capex of an Uber style business. And if you were inventing a taxi business now, would you go back and spend the capex on vehicles? And maybe you would. Maybe you say, actually, like, you know, but I don't know. No, you probably wouldn't, right? You would probably be investing in the tech. So, I mean, there's obviously the bias of the you know, where you sit, you know, but I wonder, with the conversation you're having there, like, that it doesn't chime with me that the future is in a business selling mostly hardware and a tiny fraction of software, when the software is necessary to operate the hardware. Like, that does not feel like how that's going to keep skewing that way.
Yeah. Although, again, I think it's partly down to definition, because he was saying, let's say someone spends $1 million on digital signage, you know, 99% of that will be on screens and installation and all the rest of it. But he was saying in internal comms that they might sell 100 screens, but only 6 of them will be having digital signage on them. The other 94 or whatever will be for meeting rooms, and they don't need software on there.
Well, really?
Well, but they don't want software on there. But he actually said, if you could do something where it would be really easy for people to easily switch between presenting and having some, then he said, like, there's a massive opportunity there. No one's doing that, which I thought was kind of interesting. But just as an aside, actually, this is completely unrelated, but, well, sort of related. But isn't it funny how you were saying there, that was 10 years ago. Isn't it funny how quickly you forget? Like, I was thinking this morning about how I used to go to a restaurant and people smoke in the restaurant, and that was okay. It's kind of weird. And even now, when you watch TV shows and people are all hanging out in restaurants and you're thinking social distancing, it's kind of weird how quickly.
Have you noticed the end of canned laughter in comedy?
Yeah.
It's gone, right?
Yeah.
But that was standard.
It's so bizarre how you just like, oh, it's kind of, I was just thinking how absolutely foreign it would be now to go into a restaurant and I used to smoke, I don't anymore, but go in a restaurant and someone sat next to you and your food arrives and they spark up, like, and that would be normal. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, I still, like, you know, when I'm in Dubai, that's still kind of doable. It's kind of slightly bad. But it's you do adjust very quickly, like, and I think that we forget that. So, you know, that whole, like, looking backwards to see forwards is usually problematic because
well, if you always do what you
surprise yourself, you go, oh my God, things have changed so quickly. It's like, but that's how it always is, a little bit.
Where's that thing, isn't it? If you always look backward, or you did what you did, you're never gonna change.
Well, you'll just make those micro improvements, right? Like, you know, I imagine that the best run taxi firms were the ones where they really nailed down, like, the operator model, and they all had their right codes, and everyone was trained properly to estimate traffic better. And, you know, like the good companies would have really, you know, softened out those edges and made it much more reliable, and looked at their data and probably gone, right, we need more drivers on at this peak time and less at this point. Like, they would have been great firms, but at no point did they sit back and go, should we just rip this all up and just, like, start again?
Well, I mean, bear in mind as well that Uber like doesn't exist everywhere even in England. Like where I live near Cambridge, Uber doesn't.
True.
So if I want to get a cab, if I'm coming home from London on the train and I when I used to drink and I was a bit drunk and I needed to get a cab back, I would have to have the foresight to call them on a phone or text them actually and say,
there you go. That's not bad, right?
Yeah.
The text, presumably you'd hopefully get some kind of instant or very close to instant reply.
Yeah, normally no. It's the other. Can you get me up at 8:10? Oh no, it's really busy. You know, I haven't got anything till 9:30. That would be the norm. But yeah, it's kind of like
that's a reason to quit drinking alone.
Yeah, there's certainly benefits to I can just get in my car and drive. That's good. But yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, I guess going wide and going deep. Okay. So it's not as unrelated as it might sound. What we just sort of went on to there, because if we accept that, you know, the future changes, you know, in technology, it's a technology circles, but that it comes at you kind of fast, and what seems totally legit, the best right way to do something today, often 10 years later kind of looks sort of almost comical. Then that is a good reason to go deep on one thing, because, you know, if you've got a few things, right, we know that we're going through finally a digital transformation period of accelerated digital transformation in workplaces. Like we know that it's kind of it was always coming because it's been talked about and a lot of companies had embraced it, but it hadn't hit that sort of part of the graph where it's like mass adoption had really taken it on. It was kind of getting there, you know, but it wasn't, but the big corporates hadn't quite really tackled it. They were flirting with it for sure, right? Because I know a lot of people who work in big corporates and they did have some flexibility coming into their life, but it was nowhere near what sort of looks like it's coming now. And you know, so we know that there's big changes coming to the workplace, right? And that is an area where we have probably we have better expertise there, because that's where we have, as in our careers, that's where we've been working. Like we are not domain experts in retail, or hospitality, or quick serve restaurants. We're not really like you know, we've done a reasonably good job at building something that's useful for them, but this isn't our world. Like, but the working world, that corporate world, working with corporates and doing digital work inside of corporates. I mean, that's what we spent pretty much the last 20 years doing. Yeah.
And if you think like on our side, like if, you know, when we hired a lawyer to do our fundraising, guess what? We went for a lawyer that really understood tech, not just investment, but tech investment, because, and that paid absolute dividends for us because, you know, the conversations that we had, you weren't having to educate them on, you know, why you would do something. They knew it. They'd been there. They understood. They knew who the investors were in this world. They knew what a proper term sheet should look like. You know, compared to, say, the kind of legal advice or investment advice we got when we did Tepelo, for example.
Oh my God.
Like, what kind of technology expertise were we having access to there? And it does make a massive difference. You know, the same with, well, I guess an agency as well, creative agency. Quite often you will go to an agency who says, right, look, you know, we're all about FMCG. Look at all our FMCG clients. You're like, okay, well, these guys totally understand this sector. So, you know, it is a normal thing. I think as you move up the chain, people will probably value that expertise.
Also, as you move up the chain, both in terms of size of customer, size of budget, and probably seniority of contact, you're more likely to get found out when you really don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you know, if I could just imagine myself sat in a room with, you know, some directors of a massive retail business, the moment I try and open my mouth and tell them how retail works, it's just going to be fraudulent in the extreme. Like, because I probably wouldn't even have the audacity to kind of go, yeah, so what you really want to do
let me tell you about retail.
Yeah. Let me take your 100 years combined experience in the room in retail and tell you a bit about what I think I've seen.
Having
I've been in a shop.
Yeah, visited several shops in my lifetime.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time shopping. Actually, I haven't really. I don't even like shopping that much.
Yeah.
So that's even that I can't even lie about.
It's like it's like the classic thing of people who, you know, start a restaurant because they like food or they like cooking at home or whatever. You know, like guess what?
One of the best things I ever heard about that was you should only really start a cafe if you're really passionate about cleaning or getting up super early, or, you know,
or being abused by rude staff or rude customers.
Don't start a coffee shop because you have a love for coffee. Have it for a love of 4 a.m. starts, cleaning a lot, and and putting up with crap. I was obviously by someone who's a bit bitter about it, but it made me laugh because I thought, you know, you're right. Like, you know, as an owner of a coffee shop starting out, we would not have many moments where you're there just absorbing the sweet aroma of your Colombian beans
and wondering which kind of which kind of wood paneling you're going to use on the wall or something.
Yeah, that moment would come and go rather rapidly, soon to be replaced by a lot of hard work.
Would it be distressed pine or distressed oak?
How about just distressed numbers?
Yeah. Well, you do your training, your body pump training and stuff. Presumably, some of the things that you spend a lot of your time doing aren't necessarily. I don't know, maybe they are, but there were probably some surprises there about what the things that you would be dealing with as a body pump instructor, the reality versus the
a lot of planning and a lot of exactly. It was less about, a lot about the class experience, but what goes into the class experience is your preparation for the class experience. So, you know, like just making sure, just even basics like, have I got all my kit? Is everything charged? Do I have all my cables? Right. That will pretty much define whether a class is going to go well or not. Do I have enough spare batteries, and do I have the bits and bobs that can go wrong on my person so that I don't have a room full of people getting angry that it hasn't started on time? So there are definitely stuff that you, obviously when you're thinking about, I think when you dream about a job or a thing like that, you think about these kind of highlight moments of your sort of, you know, you're in track 7 and you really, everyone, the energy in the room's great and everyone's like, and that does happen. But then there's all the time you just spend like reading choreography notes, listening to things over and over and over. So you've memorized it properly, you know, but that's probably like 60% of it. And then there's the bit
exactly.
And just dealing with that, like invoicing, like having to invoice the gym, chase up, like if you haven't got paid, and
so you could say
out cover. Sorry,
you could say if you want to be a personal trainer, you have to be passionate about being organised and admin. Yeah.
Packing your bag the night before, making sure you've got everything, having a plan B and a plan C for random things going wrong.
And I think,
putting away things a lot, cleaning things up and putting them away because people haven't done it for you. Or taking their own stuff away. So you have to, because you'll get an angry text. That studio is a mess.
I'm only here for track 7. Don't bother me, man.
Yeah, but what about track 7? It's like, don't care. Clean up after yourself.
You should have been there in track 7. Honestly, there's so much energy in the room.
It was golden. Yeah.
That
don't care, you're fired.
Yeah. Well, so I think with, you know, internal comms as well, it's like you realize that that it is complicated, that the client has a lot of hurdles to jump through, perhaps in a different way to, say, someone, you know, in retail that might be, well, of course we need screens because we're retail, sort of thing. In internal comms, it's, I think, because it's new-ish, that again is this like, it's not just a question of like, hey, look at our features. It's like, but I've got this budget from here. I've got this budget over here. I've got this security audit that I need to do. I've got some screens here, but I need to buy some screens, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I think part of becoming an expert in this isn't just features. It's about types of content they're going to be used, but also a deep understanding of how they are navigating their own organizational challenges, their own admin challenges.
But it's scary, isn't it? Because it's about placing bets, and it's about placing bigger bets on smaller odds. Well, potentially smaller odds, because I suppose it's easy. You don't want to go into a flooded market. Like you can do that. The market's there. It's ripe. It's proven, but it's hard to make your thing. It's that balance between, is this big enough? And is this genuinely going the way I want it to? Or is it just the way I want it to go?
And I think, ultimately, and this is something we're going to have to do, you have to make a call. And it's going to be one of those things that, in fact, I've got this book here. Definitely recommend it. Play Bigger. It's effectively, if you're going to take something in a new direction, some of your existing customers won't get it. They won't. They'll sort of like, I don't understand why you're doing that. Like, because I bought you because of this, and now you're saying you do this. It doesn't that. But ultimately, there is a leap of faith at some point. But then there has to be an absolute commitment by the company, right? This is what we're doing. Like, and we've validated it in some ways, perhaps maybe not just with our customers, but also with the customers that we want to, ultimately win. And we think that we're correct, and we're going to go for it. But yeah, I guess one of the things with SaaS businesses is because you can measure things to such an nth degree. The tendency, especially with me, because I love numbers and things like that, is to kind of is to look backwards and say, well, this worked, that worked, this worked, that worked. But at some point, I think you do have to kind of say, okay, we don't know if this is going to work.
Right, I see what you mean. Yeah, sorry, yeah, right, yeah. No, I agree with where you're going on that, because I was going to say, you can't measure the outcome of going down one road 5 times, right? You can't say, all right, here's the outcome of what hospitality focus would be. Here's the outcome of what that, you can't. No.
You've got it. At some point, you have to say, we've looked at the data, we've spoken to customers, we've spoken internally, blah, 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 and now we're going to make a call. And there's a little bit, I liken it a little bit in my head to that leap of faith we took when we leapt from one side of the bank, which was agency, to the other side of the bank, which was product. And there was a moment in the middle where we could have just fallen in the river, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite as extreme as that, because we're not actually proposing to do something quite as fundamental. But there is at some point a case of going, right, this is what we're going to do, and these are the reasons for why we're doing it, and this is the validation that we've got. But ultimately, until we actually do it, we will never know. We won't know quite how successful it's going to be.
And so one of my thinkings about kind of like why this was a good time for us to do this was because during the COVID time, things got quieter, right? People weren't coming in with as much new business, anywhere near as much as new business, right? And how could they? The places will shut down. So the thinking was that actually during that time, it was a good time to sort of be more introspective, if that's the right word. Is that the right word? Is that even a word? Yeah. I don't know why that didn't chime with my head as soon as I said it, but and to kind of use that time to go, right, well, what is it? Close one chapter, open a new one. But the thing is, often this kind of talk gets, the moment anytime I've spoken about this with most people, normally the word pivot comes out. And I'm like, is it a pivot? Because it's not, because it's actually, it's what we already do.
It's basically it's kind of, it's defining what it is that we do, and nailing your colors to the mast. That's different to saying, you know what, this didn't work, so we're basically going to completely, change what we're going to. Instead of being a digital signage company, we're now going to be a such and such consultancy. We're going to be a internal comms consultancy or something. That's
more about chasing what's working well already and just chasing it harder. I suppose at the expense of chasing other things as well.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, that is the right thing to do on the whole.
Yeah, I think it feels that, and the reason that you do that is because of limited resources. And also, yeah, because in theory, if you had all the money in the world and all the time in the world, you could go, right, we're going to go deep on each of these verticals and we're going to have a different product for each of these things. But ultimately, yeah, if you're evolving the product and you're going, well, what do we do for QSRs? What do we do for retail? What do we do for, you can end up going wide and not deep. And then someone else comes along and produces this killer set of apps for corporates, for internal comms. And we're like, oh shit, we've got this, we've got hundreds of apps, but they kind of do what everyone else is doing, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So then the big question would be, all right, why not do that from the very start?
I guess from the very start, you're still trying to, it would be a bold thing to do. I suppose you're still trying to figure out what it is that you're doing, and what
are the ones that do go. Sorry, so I didn't mean to cut you off. Just to add to the question, because the ones that do that from the very start, do they become the winners, or is the winner normally the one that goes broad and then down, or the one that just goes straight in?
I imagine it's the four. Well, okay. The only thing I would say about that is, Drift is a great example. Conversational marketing is where they took it. It started off as a sort of an internal website messaging tool, but conversational marketing, they came up with that concept and hated it for a year, but they were kind of writing about it. And then eventually, I think a publisher came along and said, hey, this is cool. People are talking about this conversational marketing thing. Can you write a book about it? And then they thought, well, actually, okay, well, that was their signal. So in some ways you think, oh yeah, Drift, what massive visionaries. They had this really cool narrative. They created a new a new category around conversational marketing. But in reality, that didn't happen. It evolved over a period of time. And then eventually it would, and then obviously they created it. They owned that category and they did very well off the back of it. But it wasn't as much of it wasn't like the CEO on day one said, guys, this is what we're working towards conversational marketing. I'm going to start at this. I'm going to evolve, and I think they, like us, they kind of, had an idea, and it evolved over time. And then they saw opportunities. Like when we first started, we thought this was going to be an SMB thing. And then we started seeing opportunities and like, wow, this is kind of interesting. And look at how these customers are behaving. They didn't never churn. They expand by a huge amount of,
There's also, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that was my point really.
There's also two other things which I think kind of maybe make it slightly a self-fulfilling prophecy, but in a positive way, which is if you do stand for one thing, it's like kind of back to your point. Well, no, it wasn't about your point actually, because you said that they didn't have this grand vision, but the vision evolved. But once they got that grand vision, I bet you it was a hell of a lot easier for them to recruit. I bet it was a lot easier for people to kind of get behind that brand and even for their customers to amplify that brand, because that brand had a voice. It had a point of difference. It had a point of view.
It had it, and it was a discipline in itself. Like a publisher came along and said, "Can you write a book about this new discipline called conversational marketing?" And I was like, "Wow!" And I think, interesting as well. They took it to a new. So the original one was for the original product, I guess, is for customer support. It's like, hey, rather than someone pick up the phone and ask you a question or send you an email, now they can do it on the website. But they moved that and said, now it's for sales and marketing, because this isn't about customer support. This is about being able to sell more and market more. You can create content that's more specific to the user. We understand who the user is, all that kind of stuff. So by the time conversational marketing came along and it was being used, I listened to an interview with the CEO, I think it's the CEO, and he said he hated it because he said, it wasn't very conversational marketing. It wasn't very snappy. And we thought it was too focused on marketing when we were about a lot more than just marketing. And he said, I just hated it. I hated it to start with.
Also, conversational doesn't really sound like you're about to sell, does it? Like having a conversation doesn't normally lead to a sign me up. It's like, it's a pleasant chat, not,
So, exactly that. And then they kind of realized, well, if you've got they started writing about it, but they didn't want it to be their thing. And then they realized that if a publisher came to you and said, everyone's talking about this new discipline, you guys came up with it. Can you write a book about it? And they were like, wow, there's something here. This needs to be our category.
But then also, strangely enough, you become a part of that category, and the success of that category is also you're part of that movement to building that category.
Yeah.
So
and
again,
you define it.
You define it, you feed it,
and you call the shots. You say what it includes and what it doesn't include because you invented it.
Exactly. But it's not even about category complete. I mean, yes, if you do literally define it like that, I don't think we're going to do that exactly. But once you latch onto it, you have a vested interest in growing that and championing it too. So it's not like the category will do what it will do regardless of you. You're then part of it. You suddenly picked up a spade and you're digging too. You're figuring it out. So,
and that is quite motivational, I think, for founders, but also for staff, as you say, for employment, even for customers going, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this conversational marketing thing because that's a new discipline. And I think it makes total sense. I mean, like,
you would never be able to feel that, would you? If you go to a website and it says, here's all the various industries that our thing can be applied to. That feeling, that kind of like that, you couldn't. You'd be like, great. You'd probably be kind of happy and go, oh, that's cool. Yeah, awesome. Well done. But it wouldn't ever get you kind of, I'm part of a movement, because what movement are you part of, really?
Yeah. Well, Andy Raskin, who is someone else I kind of really like, he talks about this idea of when you're selling belonging rather than selling a solution necessarily. You're selling the sense of, if you think about brands, they sell the idea of belonging to something, being a part of something. I mean, you've got to take it with a little bit of reality and pragmatism as well. It's like, what do you actually do? If you're Nike, okay, you've got the dollars and you can get behind a movement, just do it and all that kind of stuff. If you're a startup company that no one's heard of, it's harder to kind of really realistically think about people in that sense.
But no, I mean, Nike have that, like, wasn't it I just was watching that Michael Jordan thing on Netflix, and Nike was the startup then, and they had to really roll it out to sign up Michael Jordan, who I think was it Adidas or Reebok was kind of one of the big ones in town that were going to give him the big money. But I think what Nike managed to do is they really appealed. They brought his parents down and they made it a real family experience of it, from the bit in the Netflix I've seen. And they said, welcome to the Jordan family. And they really got him in on their vision.
Wow.
And they were the challenger. But then obviously, like, Michael Jordan, it's kind of what I was saying, like, Michael Jordan then became part of the movement. And then, and they took a gamble on him. That was when he was still, he was very highly rated, but wasn't the full, greatest of all time sort of guy. But then in a way it becomes, he became synonymous as that and a fashion statement. Like, they obviously produced great product with him, and it's like you can't pull one away from the other.
Yeah.
So and then now it looks so obvious, like almost to what you said.
Things always look obvious in hindsight, don't they?
Like, their office looked a bit rubbish, and they kind of got this handwritten thing on the wall, welcome Jordan family. But they made a bold statement. They were like, right, we're going to go up. Like, we believe that guy represents what we're looking to do. We think that he's probably going to go on and be something special. I don't know how they identified it exactly. And then they said, well, what can we do that the big ones can't? Well, we probably can't cut the biggest check right now, I think. I mean, I only watched it. I'm not an expert on it. But I thought that was interesting. They made a big play for it. They were like, no, this is the right thing. And they did something that the others didn't, which wasn't just because they had all the money and the prestige. As my understanding anyway. And I did see a little clip of the day that he went in there, and it does look quite funny.
People have said how good it is, that
it is good. Yeah. There's definitely, I mean, like, it's controversial, but yeah, it's interesting. It's just, what you find is, like, how with the people that really truly succeed, or the companies that truly succeed, like, their story is jagged. It's never as obvious as retrospectively how it looks.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the point of what we've been talking about today, isn't it? It's like, it's quite nice recording this now, because in a few years' time, we could look back and go, guys, you're idiots, or wow, that was insightful. But hopefully we'll also be able to hear the tremors of doubt in our voices as we talk around it. And And then we've got evidence of it. Go, look, see, it wasn't bloody obvious, was it? um, or, oh, that's the day we took the wrong turn.
Yeah, if only we'd just been a generalist.
Yeah, I should have just carried on, like just doing nothing.
Or we tried it and it didn't really work, so we just sort of slowly slinked back.
Backtracked a bit and then deleted the podcast and deleted the YouTube video. All right, I think.
Yeah, we've gone quite a lot.
Yeah.
Over our half
call
hour.
It today.
Awesome. Okay.
So.